And we are back with another episode of the Hockey Princess podcast. I am your host, the Hockey Princess. We got Chris, the old guy here.
Hey,
Just
everybody.
here, make sure to hit that like and subscribe on either Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. However you watch or listen to us ramble on a weekly basis. Let's get into it. Got a lot of NHL stuff to cover. First being, we have a couple of head coaching changes in the NHL starting for next year. The St. Louis Blues have announced that their interim head coach is now officially their head coach, which is Drew Bannister. So St. Louis has got a new head coach going into next season. Same with Ottawa, who has announced that their new head coach is Travis Green. As we talked about last week, there's still some openings in the NHL. That will be more to come. I wouldn't be surprised if one gets announced around draft weekend, just because for those who don't know, if this is your first year kind of following hockey, there's usually some sort of big drama dropped right around draft weekend going into free agency. Either it's right before the draft and it's announced a couple of hours before night one, or it's in that, murky couple of days in between the draft ended and then going into free agency. It's a week where there's just everybody likes to drop their drama at the same time.
Yeah, well, you've got a lot of press around, so it's a way to get your team's name out there and everything, and you get it on a national front just because everybody nationally is there.
Right.
So if you drop it before the draft for like 3 weeks, it's luckily just covered locally, so gives you a little bit more national exposure.
Yeah. And speaking of the draft, we had the lottery last night. Unfortunately, the Blackhawks will not be drafting Macklin Celebrini. As bummed as we are, that he will be going to the San Jose Sharks. I thoroughly enjoyed whoever the guy was interviewing him. Poor Macklin, him being like, "Are you looking at Zillow yet?" And Macklin had the perfect response of, "What's Zillow?" It was funny because I think it was a dumb question, and I feel bad for these hockey players having to answer really stupid questions.
It was borderline. There is no way that kid needs to go through that.
No.
There's no way. 24 hours ago, the kid's in Europe. He's going to play at the Worlds and then is sent home because Brandon Hagel's coming. There is no need to make that kid go through that.
Yeah.
And yeah, the questions were stupid. The whole thing just gave me a creepy feeling. You need to stop that.
It was definitely weird, like the camera being on Macklin for, the flip. Because, that's a 17-year-old that can't have a reaction to where he's going to go. Like, that's weird. That's weird. Also, just, I think he handled it great. I mean, because he was very much, there's rumblings that, he looked miserable. He looked upset because he has to go to San Jose. Those are the same people that last year during the draft said that Connor Bedard looked miserable when his name was called to be in Chicago. It's their 17-year-old boys.
Yeah, but, he's no different than a lot of other people. He's been trained and been answering questions forever. Me and you were at the draft party for one Patrick Kane. And, he had to field questions after the draft. And, you'll probably remember the question that I always bring up is the last person to ask a question is, of course, is the 40-year-old drunk guy who's got his big stack of beers and goes, "Well, Patrick, now that it's Chicago, is it the Cubs or the Sox?" And Patrick Kane, for a brief second, gave that guy, "What the fuck are you talking about?" look for a second, and he switched it and just went, "Well, I guess, I'm a Yankees fan because I live close to New York." But for a brief second, I saw his reaction of going, "Oh my God, this didn't just get asked to me." But he, so they all know how to play this game. They all know not to give the press anything. So
it was that question that 10-year-old me decided that was going to be one of my favorite hockey players. I definitely remember that question. I knew right then and there. I was like, this is my guy. So
I was just impressed by the savviness of an 18-year-old. I was blown away by it, because I would have definitely would have been a different answer on my part. But go on.
So draft will be last weekend in June. First round is going to be the 28th. And then rounds 2 through 7 are going to be June 29th. We can talk a little bit about early predictions rumbling in the rumor mill. I don't want to spend too much on it because I want to talk more about the playoffs and this past week. And also I would like to be just a little bit more educated or even just for myself, before we dive in completely on who we think Kyle Davidson should pick. I will say I did find it very interesting of Kyle's response for getting the number 2. A lot of people were like, oh, are you so bummed? And he's like, with the number 2 pick, we can set the tone and basically decide how everything else falls into place. And I do think that's true, because there's so many very big maybes from potentially pick 2 to maybe 6 of, depending on the team's need, it could go a variety of different ways. And Kyle's unfortunately right. He does have the opportunity to basically control what follows after Macklin getting picked.
I mean, it's definitely, it's your classic old adage, the draft will start at number 2. Sometimes in the NHL, the draft starts at number 3. You know who those first 2 guys were going to be. But this year, you knew who number 1 was going to be, and there's question marks on 2 through 6.
Yeah. I know right now there's definitely main rumbling in the rumor mill is going to be Artyom Levshina from Michigan State, and then Ivan Demidov in the KHL. That's kind of very much where everybody's at. Do you go with the defenseman? Do you go with the forward? I think everybody knows my opinion that I would love for them to take the Michigan State kid. If they were to go the Demidov route, there's always will he come over from the KHL? The great thing is Ivan only has 1 more year left on his contract in the KHL, so there's definitely more potential for him to come sooner than like Kantsarov, who we drafted last year, or even Michkov, who is going to be a couple of years. There's not he didn't just sign an extended contract in the KHL. There's potential for him to come soon, but it's still a big if. I will say, Davidson did talk a lot about, not Davidson, reading the Scott Powers article from last night. He does have a scout out there in Russia that I know Katie is tight. It very much values the opinion of the scout that's watching in the KHL. His name is, I'm going to try not to butcher this, Anatoly Semenov. And that was the scout who, sought out Kantsarov, and, that did happen. So I don't think Katie is completely we don't really have any insight into the KHL. I'm kind of afraid of drafting from the KHL. I know some teams are, but it's still always going to be a big if compared to drafting guys out of the CHL or college.
Yeah, there is not the stigma around Ivan than there was around is that Michkov or whatever?
Yeah.
Michkov last year, of as far as when is he going to come, where does he want to play? There doesn't seem to be that stigma with Ivan. It seems more
of a when than an if.
Yes, and I'm hearing it could be as early as right after his contract's up. Yeah. But this is where he wants to be, where Michkov, you were never sure, and everybody was unsure of would he accept coming there. It seems like Ivan will accept most things, and I guarantee they've had Panarin, they've dealt with it. You have a good Russian base in Chicago. the kid would have no problem coming here.
Yeah.
As far as my thoughts on the number 2 pick, that'll be for another show.
Yeah.
I not completely behind the Sparty guy.
I know.
Looking at other avenues.
I know. And like I said, we'll get into this in future episodes, and we'll probably talk about the draft for multiple episodes going up into the draft. The last bit of the sound bites from Kyle from last night that I do want to talk about real quick is, he talks about how they're very forward heavy and they're very defenseman heavy. I would like to clarify my opinions in that we do have forwards, but we're very bottom 6 forward heavy. We are not top 6 forward heavy.
So he said we're forward heavy and
we're yes,
defenseman heavy. So his team's ready.
Yeah.
He's ready. He's saying this is good enough. You're almost anorexic if we're using the word heavy. Come on, we don't know what we have.
Right. I'm saying out of my opinion, we're very bottom 6 heavy. We do have a lot of forwards, but they all play a similar style-ish. There's definitely a couple that play a little bit of a different game, but there are a lot that are a similar-ish type of hockey player in terms of Ludwinski, Savoie, Hayes, Doc. I think really they play a very different game, and I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I'm saying Doc and Ludwinski are going to play a different style of game compared to NASCAR and more.
Right. And as of right now, I don't know if it's more in NASCAR even, but those are probably the only 2 that you look at that might be top 6 talent.
Right.
Again, as we've talked about on other shows, Doc could play in a top 6 role because of his size and what he could bring to a line. But as far as flat out top 6 talent, probably not.
Yeah.
So we need a lot of talent still.
We do need a lot of talent. So that was one thing that I wanted to clarify that I really didn't agree with, that we were very forward heavy. We do have a lot of forwards, but they're very much they're very, very similar in the way that they play. He also said, yeah.
So basically what he's now stated is
that we're ready.
He was big about getting all these draft picks, and now we've gotten all these draft picks, and now he says we're heavy.
Yeah.
Too many draft picks.
Yeah.
Before, needed a lot of draft picks. Now too many. A lot of double talk.
Yeah.
Did he answer that one with that being said?
I don't know. I'll have to look. He also said that we're very defenseman heavy.
With that being said. Go on.
Said I would clarify. We do have a lot of defenseman prospects. However, and I think this is a point for the Sparty guy category, there are a lot of defensemen that we have that also play a very similar style of game. We have a lot of, defenseman prospects that are very skilled offensive defensemen, but they struggle in their own end. You've got Core, who I think Core has definitely improved from the start of the season to where he is now. And also it was just going to be a rough season to begin with, but he is definitely more skilled offensively than defensively, be it, age, size, whatever. Still love the kid. Wyatt Kaiser is also in that same category, and we definitely saw that with the first round exit of the Rockford Ice Hogs. He is a skilled offensive defenseman, but struggles in his own end. So you are defenseman heavy, but you have a lot of similar guys, where the Sparty isn't a glamorous pick, but guess what? He's great in his own end.
No, again, if you want to talk a tiny bit, so we went right back to the draft, but Sparty is a right-handed defenseman who you can probably pencil in for 15 years. True, he is the safe pick. There is nothing wrong with safe, because if you draft number 2 and you miss, it leaves a hole.
Yeah.
Just Stan Bowman. So it is important. You don't want to strike out. Might not need the home run. A triple might just do you. So,
And I think you can, I mean, and I haven't really looked into what the bottom half of the first round looks like, but let's not forget we still have a pick at 19. There's nothing wrong with going with a safe pick for number 2 and then maybe a little bit of a reach, a little bit more of an ambitious pick still in the first round. I'm not saying a complete reach, but it's a little bit more okay to, be a little bit more of a swing and a miss with number 19 than with number 2.
Are we 19 or 20?
Thought we were, well, maybe we're 20. I thought we were 19.
I think we might be 20 with Vegas going out, but I am not sure either. But I am so rarely wrong that it frightens me.
So I think there's nothing wrong with being the safe pick. Also, with the amount that we have in the draft picks alone and having another pick in the first round, it's okay. But yeah, so that's all we're going to talk about for the draft for this week.
I could go on for another probably hour and a half if you'd like.
No, we have all of June, and I need to look at more things. Though I am curious though right now, because you said you're not really leaning towards the Sparty. In your brain, do you have one right now that you would like? You want the Russian? You want Lindstrom?
I want everything that I'm reading about him. If I can somehow get a guarantee that he is going to come over after next year, the Russians don't want to. It's a special talent. I'm hearing he can do things that most players can't. And I need somebody like that. I understand he's 5'11", 170 right now. And he's not going to be huge, but though talent like that doesn't grow on trees. I need to read more into it.
Yeah.
But you would have to have that guarantee. So, but I'm starting to like him. Yeah.
Yep. And I mean, I definitely agree. If there is a guarantee in a perfect world that, Katie has the guarantee that he will come over, then by all means, I'll still be a little bit bummed because I like the Sparty kid. I like the safe pick. And I also think right-handed defensemen with that level of talent do not grow on trees either. And I also do not want to see him slip in the draft because I don't really see Anaheim picking him either. With their pool, I'm just unsure, but we're going to get nerdy about that in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Now for the fourth time, as we've said, we will transition away from the draft. This one, we're almost guaranteeing. Take it away, Hockey Princess.
All right. So to the playoffs, we're officially in round 2. As we predicted last week, Edmonton did knock out Los Angeles. Dallas versus Vegas. It was very entertaining to the very end. You have any opinions on you being right? We didn't think you were going to be right last week.
No, I was pretty sure I was wrong on the Dallas when they went down 2-0 and lost both games at home. I was a little worried, but they were faster and they played just as much of a heavy game. And they were just deeper than Vegas at the end. But that was two heavyweights slugging it out and not giving up much.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful series to watch. I was, to tell you about their fan base, I was in the Vegas airport and never heard a cheer for a Vegas goal or anything. So, but watch them lose in the Vegas airport. But, yeah, it was a great series. I didn't think anybody could come back from losing the first 2 at home. But kudos to Dallas. Ottinger, the Otter as they call him.
Remember when we could have had him?
Yes. Got to see some Otter masks in the stands. I tell you, you playoff people, all you guys want to do is get on TV, don't you? But he really came into his own. He settled down and everything. So
nice. We have Vancouver knocking out Nashville. Very excited about that.
Yeah, and that was one series that turned on 5 minutes. Nashville had, they were trying to almost collapse as much as they did in 2010. They had that game won. It was over. It should have been over. And you relax for a second and bing, bang, boom. And that was that. So kudos to Winnipeg.
Yeah.
I got to give it to whoever their coach is. He's been everywhere. No, Vancouver's.
Oh, Vancouver's.
That's
Tocchet.
Yeah, and Tocchet's been everywhere and always has been labeled a very good coach, but could never win. So I was kind of happy for him. And Burnett I like as a coach. So
I do as well. I also shout out to Vancouver's goaltending, and also I don't know who it is, but just shout out to Vancouver's goaltending coach for being able to get this kid in the mindset, and just he's awesome. I would be very, very pleased if that kid gets called up and Vancouver somehow decides to boot DeSmith.
Yeah, shades of almost Vegas where, it didn't matter who was in net. They were going to play well enough and everybody was going to play well around them. And Vancouver has set up, you have Quinn Hughes, who's a tiny man, doing everything. And then they have 5 thumpers back there, starting with Nikito Zaitsev, or whatever his name is. Zadorov, who's played really well. He's a goofy dude, and sometimes he looks goofy on the ice, but he played really. So, kudos to them. They were able to shut things down.
Yeah. Let's see. On the eastern side, we have Toronto being done. I'm very intrigued to see how all of this pans out. I would not be shocked if, going into the draft, there is some Toronto drama. Maybe it implodes. Mitch Marner, your new Chicago Blackhawk. Who knows? I do think the core 4 does get disbanded. I do think, and I would hope, just because I'm not the biggest fan of him, that Sheldon Keefe is gone. Things need to change in Toronto. It can't keep going like this. It's not working. You have 4, forwards that are paid. One of them's the highest paid player in the NHL, and then you have 3 other ones that are very well paid, and none of them were scoring aside from Nylander. Nylander was the only one. Nobody was doing anything. So obviously things need to change. You can't just keep moving the minor pieces, getting just like little additions, thinking that these little tweaks are going to fix what's going on. There's something, really not working at the core of this team, and something's got to change.
Yeah. With all of that being said, number one, we'll address the whole, Mitch Marner for Seth Jones trade that's coming up.
What? No.
That is not going to happen.
Not
I believe Chicago would be worse off if that trade were to happen. I understand that nobody likes Seth Jones except me.
I do.
A handful of others. But you're going through a rebuild with a lot of young defensemen. He is a perfect one to mentor. He did a pretty good job mentoring Alex Vlasic this year, I'd say.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be making that. As far as Toronto, the team, this is the best I've seen them look in a playoff series. Granted, their top guys couldn't score, but they didn't give up a ton. And this is the first year that that's happened. Their problem has always been defense. So, again, when I think they're closer, yes, I do believe, but I've got to agree with you, Hockey Princess. I don't see how you go now for the 5th year in a row, trotting out the same old thing and expecting different. You just have to shake it up. If not, your plan is to keep all 4 of those guys for huge money. And you're already seeing that it doesn't work. So it'll be interesting. Toronto will be the center of hockey as always. And just there you always are because they're not good enough.
So also just shout out to that series and going into minus tonight's game. Jeremy Swayman has been playing quite literally out of his mind, and he definitely did, in the Toronto series as well as the first game against Florida. And I just want to, I'm a big fan of his, and I just think he played in the first round very, very well. I learned about, the drama and the, maybe vendetta that he's got against Toronto.
What is that?
Oh, so it's Jeremy Swayman's draft year, right? He's talking, he's interviewing, and Toronto, he's having multiple conversations with Toronto. And he is under the impression that Toronto is very much interested in him. They pass on him for a goaltender that or a player that I don't even think makes it onto the Maple Leaf roster at any point in his limited career. So they pass on Swayman. Boston's the next pick. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of wanting to get them out of the playoffs because, they passed on him.
It's I don't know. I've heard that from athletes before. Is you take every bit that you can to give yourself motivation. So that's another one that can fuel you. You take it. So good for him.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was spectacular.
Yeah.
Up until tonight.
But that's okay because we're cheering for Florida in this series anyway. So yeah, I think the other East Coast ones were decided already. But yeah, so we've got New York versus Carolina right now. New York's up 2-0 in the series. Unfortunately, I'm a little concerned.
Well,
but I do think a packed Madison Square Garden in postseason, it has got to be an intimidating place to play in. I don't think it's an easy barn to play in. Maybe it'll turn around when they go back home. I don't think everything has been Freddie Anderson's fault.
No.
Carolina. I don't think that they're at the position where, Anderson's now just wetting the bed and they need to give Kuchikov the net. I don't think they're there. I think it's been a lot of, awkward situations that have led to New York goals. And also, I think at the end of the day, New York is just relentless.
They are, but I mean, I give play to Carolina in game 2.
Yeah. There's
Carolina
only so much you can do in double overtime.
They're making silly, stupid penalties at times, and they're paying the price with that power play. They've gone through most of the year being able to play that way, a little too over aggressive and taking the penalties because they have such an incredible kill. Well, New York's got an incredible power play, and they've lost that battle, and that's been the difference. It has nothing to do with Freddie. Again, I occasionally hear Carolina doesn't have any superstars. I'm sorry, Aho is a phenomenal player. He puts that team on his back at times. So they have enough. It's just you can't give penalty advantage to a team like New York.
No.
You guys are just too close in talent. That's a very talented club and a very talented power play.
Also, very talented goaltender.
Yeah. So
The
hopefully going back to
Sirkin was making were just quite ridiculous.
yes. Yes, because in the third, Carolina should have had him. They should have had him and put him to bed. But yeah, Igor was all over the place and played phenomenal, and that's going to happen occasionally. But Carolina's not out of it.
No.
Just got to be a tiny bit more disciplined and still play with that same kind of fire. So let's hope.
Yeah. Going to Boston, Florida. Obviously, I'm rooting for Florida. I think Florida can do it. First game did not look good for Florida. A lot of people were talking about, Florida had a week off. Boston had 48 hours. At what point is rest helpful versus harmful for a team in the playoffs? Yeah, I think maybe.
That question got answered, that rest was hurtful. Now, if Florida wins, rest is helpful. Nobody really knows. It depends on the outcome. Were they unable to ramp it up right away? Who knows? It's two killer clubs that, we were talking a tiny bit before the show started. This is crusty old guys kind of hockey.
Yeah.
It always used to be talked about with the Blackhawks and their teams. I think Hitchcock was the one when he was on St. Louis who talked about it. They take your will. They impose their will and take yours. And these are two teams that impose their will and plan to take yours. Except I don't see either of these teams giving up their will.
No.
The score gets a little high. Even the team that's winning is still trying to run somebody through, the fourth row. They're still thinking about how to make a mark on a 4-1 game that you'll remember in game 3. It's beautiful hockey. It got a little out of hand tonight. A little too much and a little too comical. But again, these are two teams that aren't backing down from any tiny aspect of the game.
No.
So good hockey. Good hockey.
Very good hockey. Currently, we've got game 1 of Edmonton versus Vancouver. Currently, Edmonton is up 2-0 in that game 1. Shocker. And then we've got Dallas versus Colorado. Did you watch any portion of the game? Do you have any opinions on your game 1 of your Dallas boys?
Any opinion? Yeah. I've got opinions.
I figured.
Yeah, they wet the bed, my Dallas boys. They were up 3-0. Colorado's a talented team. And you got to play a little bit more structured, but that game could have went either way. That's two unbelievably well-matched teams, and it's going to come down to containing the McKinnon line. If you contain them, if they get a goal or less in the game, I think you win. Now, if it's 2 goals, it's iffy. If they get 3 points, then you're done. You don't have a ton more else to worry about. Of course, there's going to be secondary scoring, but that team's going to live and die with the McKinnon line and Makar on the back end. So, and their goaltender is finding enough of his game to get by. So that one should be another darn good series. Dallas ain't going to go away. They just went through a series where they lost the first 2 at home. So more good hockey. It's everywhere.
Always good hockey. So that is it. Do you have any playoff opinions going into the second round? Any hopes, dreams?
Well, the hope is for Florida to win. The dream, is for Florida to win. No, I've watched.
The more Rutu on the screen, the better.
Well, it's a bucket list thing for me to see Rutu lift the Stanley Cup. So, yeah, that's what I want. I took most of the weekend off watching hockey, except was able to go to a cigar bar twice and watch some hockey at Caesars. So it wasn't terrible, but No, I think you're going to have 3 really good games.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Vancouver will stay with Edmonton. I think it's just too tall of an ask without Demko. It's just so.
That
But hey,
happens.
I hope Vancouver wins also because, yeah, fuck Edmonton.
I also think that it's okay if Vancouver. It would be great to see Vancouver go further. However, I don't think anybody at the beginning of the season really predicted Vancouver to go as far or like to do as well as they did this season. This is also their first season kind of getting out of the slump. You don't immediately go from, okay, we're bottom feeders to we're making deep runs into the playoffs. There's even the in-between time of being on the cusp, maybe winning the first series and exiting in the second. It comes with time. I don't see this being, a one-shot, lucky season for Vancouver. I think this is the first of more seasons where they go deeper into the postseason.
Yeah, and it's a 7-game series. You got to win 4. If I'm Vancouver, you're already down 2-0, or at some point in time in the series, I let McDavid make that easy pass to a wide open person, and I let 2 of my thumpers just waylay him. Basically concede the goal, but I want a body on him. I want to hit him, and I want to hit Drysdale. I'll give them 2 games to score as much as they want, but I want them to pay a physical price. So if I'm Vancouver, that starts to be my mindset. Okay, you're going to start dancing through us. Okay, we're going to leave a slot.
Yeah.
And we're going to go after you. And I would impose a little will that way and see where it goes. I don't think you have anything to lose.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get to that guy one-on-one, but you force him one way, and then you tell the other guy to come out of position and give him a little something.
Yeah. Hopping over to Rockford really quick. They did unfortunately lose to Grand Rapids. They are done in the postseason. There was a lot of Twitter fanfare. A lot of people were very unhappy with their performance in the postseason. It wasn't going to be great. I think we knew that kind of going in. I personally was just happy that we didn't have like a wild card having to play Chicago again at the All-State. This was better than they've had the past couple of years. Wasn't going to be great. Did they, their habit of, starting off great, letting the foot off the gas pedal for a little bit too long, and then it ended up costing them. Did that happen throughout games? Yes. And that definitely is the toxic habit that Rockford has had this season. I think that does get curbed just because there's a lot of people on that current roster that are not going to be on that current roster in 1 year, 3 year, 5 years. This is not the team that you have for Rockford for forever. There were a lot of people being like, we need to get rid of all these veterans, bring in the new kids immediately. Guess what? They're coming. They're coming. I promise you, they're coming. But, we're going to learn from our mistakes of Kirby Dach, Kevin Lankinen. I'm even going to throw in a Gustav Forsling in there. And we are not going to rush these kids. So, yes, you'll probably have Ludwinski next year. You'll probably have Savoie there. It is not the end of the world if Martin Misiak does not go to the Rockford Ice Hogs this upcoming season just because he was there for a couple of days. He should go back to Erie. Perron should go back to Sudbury. They're going to come. This is not the team that you will have for forever.
No, and a lot of that was just, crazy Blackhawk fans that all of a sudden just thought Rockford's going to make a long run. And that's what I heard all year. And I still had to ask people, well, why do you think that? Just because you think we deserve it? There was none of it was brought up by rationale.
Yeah.
Most of these teams are ahead of us in a rebuild and have more talent than us. It was Comesso's first year. He had a rough game. It's going to happen. You saw Detroit's goaltender look a heck of a lot better.
I think
that's because he is, and that's why he was drafted in front. I don't know why we think that we were really bad. Now we want to get good, that we're going to. It takes a lot of stuff. As far as Rockford is concerned, they're veterans. It was supposed to be a veteran-laden team. That's what you're going to go down with. You were going to get your kid defenseman some good minutes, which you did, and you got Comesso a lot of time in his first playoff experience.
And I will say, I don't think Comesso looked awful. I don't think he looked great. I think he had a good run for his first time in the AHL postseason. Stauber had one game, but that was also Stauber's first regulation loss since the end of January. And I don't think that should be erased that, Stauber was bad game one. Stauber was on a hot streak for a while. And then unfortunately came because the refs put away their whistles in the third period. And yes, I am going to die on that hill for that game. He was doing well. That's not going to all of a sudden stop. Comesso is going to grow. And, you're playing Grand Rapids. Sebastian Cossa is a menace in front of the net. He is. He's going to be a big problem facing Grand Rapids, and he's going to be a big problem not if, but when he is the starting goaltender for the Dead Wings. Because guess what? In the future, you're getting Sebastian Cossa either backing up or doing a 50-50 with Trey Augustine. That is the future, and it's not going to be fun to face 2 games out of the season. So that is going to be a continuous battle for Rockford facing Grand Rapids. That's not going anywhere. I think one of my biggest disappointments was, constantly seeing Wyatt Kaiser and Philip Bruce as a pairing together with a significant amount of ice time for the postseason. Nothing against them individually. I just don't see why you have 2 offensive defensemen or even just 2 guys that are, their weak spot is in their own end, and they're playing a considerable amount of minutes. I know Nolan Allen's out hurt. I miss him. Do I think some things could have maybe not happened if Nolan Allen was there? Sure, but we'll never know, and that's what next year's for. I do think defensively it was a bit but it'll get better.
Yeah, and you bring up the point of Grand Rapids goaltender, plus they're trotting out probably 2 top 4 defensemen in a couple of years that they're trotting out on their team. I mean, they're stacked. Defensively, Detroit is stacked. This is what I'm trying to explain to your fan base about how everything's going to just turn around.
We're so defensive heavy. You're not.
No, it's not that we're defense heavy. Is everybody gets the impression, well, we're going to improve, so we go up in the standings. Everybody in front of us is improving. Okay, Detroit's improving. Columbus is improving. Anaheim's improving. St. Louis is improving. You can go down the list. Just because we're improving doesn't mean we jump over any of these teams.
Yep.
So.
Another thing in the AHL world, the Chicago Wolves have gotten back together, repaired the marriage with the Carolina Hurricanes, and they're going to be back to being the AHL affiliate for the Carolina Hurricanes. I understand why the Wolves decided to, try being independent. I don't think it worked for them whatsoever. And I think it just bring it back together. So they're back together. It'll be great. We can see Carolina prospects once again in the city of Chicago. Little bit of Chicago news. Let me pull up the exact date. The Blackhawks are headed back to Milwaukee next season, friends. We're going back to Milwaukee. They will host a preseason game against the St. Louis Blues on October 5th at the Pfizer Forum. Highly recommend. I went there last time. It's just a great place to watch sports. The arena is just really nice. Very centrally located. It's a cute little area right outside of there. Highly recommend. It was actually just really cool because you've got all the Wild fans. Because they played the Wild last time. Milwaukee was a decent halfway point, so you've got a big 50-50. It wasn't, just because Milwaukee's right over the border, it's a bunch of Hawks fans. It was a lot of both. I also predict that it'll be a lot of both too. So it was really fun. That'll be, in preseason in October and should be a fun game.
Should be.
Yeah. We are out of time, Krusty. Do you have anything left?
I got plenty. I could go on for hours, but let's call it a night. I still got some cigar left, so I'm gonna hang out. But
Fun.
No, I got nothing left.
All right. Just as a reminder, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Leave us a review on either Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. If you have any questions, comments, you want to be on an episode, send us a message on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Also, go follow Krusty Old Guy on Twitter. Guys, we finally did it. He finally has a Twitter.
I'm on Twitter.
You're
I
on
don't think I have any followers, or do I really know how to use it? But I know I'm on it. It's like an X thing.
Yeah.
So you could send me a message. I don't know if I'll ever receive it or know how to get it, but that'll be all part of the fun.
That's the fun part, you guys. That is all for this week. We will talk at you guys next week.